All right. Welcome to all you GCP Online Meetupers. Thanks for joining us on a Friday morning. Hopefully it's not too busy for all of you. We got some exciting content today, so we appreciate you for joining us. I want to kind of have a round of introductions. We have your typical hosts, Jonathan and myself, and we're both customer engineers based in the Bay Area. And we also are joined by two additional guests. So Steph and Colin, I'll let y'all introduce yourselves.
Steph, let's do it.
All right. So I'm Stefania. I'm a customer engineer up in the Pacific Northwest, like the rest of these guys, except for not the location. And so I'm an ex-Big Iron systems programmer, and I have purple hair and play lots of video games, and occasionally do my job.
So. Pretty well, right? Pretty well.
Pretty well.
Yeah. And we got Colin over here. He's kind of incognito.
Hey, I'm Colin. I'm also a customer engineer. Been with Google for the past 2 years doing various things like RFID autonomous robots and now working on cloud.
Yeah, Colin's doing a lot of IoT stuff. He's probably one of the specialists that I know around IoT. So yeah, I mean, I think, the benefit of having customer engineers, I guess, do these type of meetups is we have a lot of customer context, a lot of customer experience, and for you, everyone listening, just please ask us questions. I think that's kind of where we bring value, is our anecdotes, the stories, the journeys that we go through on a day-to-day basis. But today we're kind of here to talk about what's new with Google Cloud Platform, and Anthony has put together some information about that, and we'll kind of go back and forth, and hopefully people watching will ask some really good questions.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we typically think of summer, we think of relaxation, everyone's on vacation, but that's not quite the case for us customer engineers. I think one of the most interesting parts of our job is keeping up with the pace of our engineering team that releases new features and products all the time. And so, this is what a typical summer looks like, but this is what we're up to at Google Cloud Platform this summer. And so today we're just going to be reviewing some of these new features and releases, and we're also going to take some time to just talk about other cool stuff that we're working on, things that the customer engineers on this call have worked with customers. And yeah, we want to hear back from you. So again, we want to keep this as interactive as possible. Let's keep it cash. Feel free to shoot us any questions that you have in the chat. And we tend to incorporate that into the conversation. So, all right. That being said, how do y'all feel about diving into this list?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, sorry, I know Kubernetes is really popular, but the London, Sydney things, I mean, we're like pounding out regions every month. It's kind of crazy how many data centers we're building, and it's incredible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll get to that in a sec.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess let's start with Kubernetes. So this is, I don't know if for those of you who are running applications on Kubernetes, be it in Google Cloud Platform or elsewhere, if you are, feel free to shoot us a message in the chat. Oh, looks like we already have someone talking about running WordPress and containers. So that's awesome. But yeah, I wanted to start with our first update that Kubernetes 1.7 is available in Google Container Engine, and that is our hosted and managed Kubernetes cluster service on Google Cloud Platform. So the thing I think that is pretty cool to point out there about Google Container Engine is that it tracks the open source project within 1 to 2 weeks. So for those of you who are familiar with Kubernetes, the major releases occur on a quarterly basis, give or take. And so what's awesome is that Container Engine tracks that about a week or two after the open source release is available. So couple things that are awesome for Kubernetes 1.7 is, there's a ton specific to Kubernetes, but if you're looking specifically at Google Cloud Platform, I think that you're going to see a few new features pop up. One that I think is pretty cool is being able to expose services via internal load balancing. So typically, if you're creating a service on Kubernetes, this will create a TCP load balancer for you on Google Cloud Platform. However, now there's an annotation where you can actually create an internal load balancer. So this is super useful for allowing Kubernetes and non-Kubernetes services to access each other on a private network or a VPC on Google Cloud Platform. So that's my one thing I think is really cool. Do y'all have on the chat or in the room? Do y'all have anything that you're super excited about with Kubernetes 1.7?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of my customers are. I think Kubernetes is definitely gaining a tremendous amount of momentum. I mean, it's great to see GKE adopt so quickly the open source version. A lot of the times, I think companies who try to do that, I mean, they're behind quite a bit, and it's kind of painful for a user to have to look at new features being released and then wait for a vendor to update their open source code. So I'm really glad that we're actually at a 2-week lag, which is great, right? Sometimes I don't think we want to be at the latest and greatest just due to maybe bugs and fixes that might need to be put in there.
Yep, that makes sense. I think another thing that's pretty cool is that we have something called alpha clusters in Kubernetes as well. So I'm sure that, and I don't have the comprehensive list on me, but if you want to experiment with some of the alpha resources with the Kubernetes API that's maybe specific to 1.7, you can actually create something called an alpha cluster. And so that's there's a differentiation between a regular container engine cluster that doesn't have alpha resources available, if I'm not mistaken. And so that allows you to play, have an ephemeral cluster. It's a sandbox that does have, new features enabled while still being able to take advantage of the hosted aspect of not having to configure your own master and things like that. So one of the things available in 1.7.2 is if you're looking at Kubernetes for machine learning, I think there are a couple good Medium blogs out there for people, for instance, setting up TensorFlow within Kubernetes and Container Engine. There's some people who have also written tutorials on running Spark on Kubernetes. And so what's pretty cool is with this 1.7 on GK, we actually enabled GPUs for those alpha clusters. So definitely something cool to play around with.
Yeah, that's huge, actually, the GPUs with, so I've seen that a lot too. I think people are just trying to use Kubernetes for almost any workload, just for the flexibility and the convenience of being able to deploy containers so quickly. I don't know, Steph, you seem pretty quiet. What's your experience with GKE right now with your customers?
Well, that's the irony, is that not a lot of my customers are using GKE.
Yeah.
I think the big thing for me is as we mentioned at the Cloud Onboard in San Francisco yesterday, a lot of the customers, for me, it's this process of taking these monolithic applications and figuring out how to turn them into microservices and turn them into something a little bit more manageable. So I spend a lot more of my time not necessarily touting the merits of Kubernetes. I mean, people love Kubernetes, more getting them to understand, okay, how do we slice this out a little surgically and make it easier to manage?
Yeah, no, that's such a really good point, right? I think a lot of, at least, I mean, so I cover Bay Area, a lot of startups, a lot of new web apps and new application development here. And starting from scratch, I think it's pretty much like by default, you start building, microservices using containers and all of that. But, I'm assuming, Steph, you cover other companies, maybe larger companies who've had traditional workloads, the traditional web app and database tier, and it doesn't really align well with kind of microservices and containers. And there's actually a lot of work that goes into turning that into an environment that is container ready, like you mentioned, microservices. So even before using Kubernetes, you really got to break down the application into something that is container ready. I think that's kind of maybe the point you're making about your customers not really using GKE yet.
Right. Yeah. Everybody's still in the okay, we know what it is phase, but now how do we get there? And sometimes the architectures are really easy to lift and shift. Sometimes it's a little bit more, there's more work. It's a longer lead time on, how do we rethink applications? I see it as kind of the same thing with databases. In the past, when I would work with like these DB2 databases, you had a lot of things happening within the database itself. And now it's this idea that you kind of want to make your databases dumber. You want them to be doing less and less themselves and have the applications handling more. So that's sort of the same approach we're taking with trying to turn applications into containered services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I came from Oracle, so a lot of people would lean on PL SQL heavily to kind of handle a lot of the stuff at the database level, but definitely that's the trend we're seeing, is making our databases dumber. Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with Steph. It's, I think that there's a trend that if buzzwords like containers, microservices are thrown around, there's this concept that, oh, it's so easy and it's let's just move everything over there. But it's definitely a process when you actually dive into it. I have, companies who are just beginning to spin off new services into Kubernetes while still maintaining stuff on their on-premise environment as they plan out how to move that into the cloud. And, they're using Kubernetes to build new things faster and easier. But it's definitely, we don't want to give off the impression that it's, a day's work, right? So yeah, that's definitely a trend that I see too.
So we're already 12 minutes in, and we've only gone through the first bullet, and we probably got quicker. I know Anthony's super excited about Kubernetes.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Java 8 one can be pretty short, right?
Yeah.
Java 8.
I threw this on there. I personally do not program in Java. I do not know Java, but I know that I've had plenty of customers who have been asking for Java 8 on App Engine Standard. It's one of the most requested things that I've seen around App Engine. And so I think we've made a lot of, at least my customers, happy with this release. And I don't know if any of y'all out there, I think Colin is proficient in Java, but if you want to talk to those.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any comments about Java 8 before we move on?
No, it just makes it a bit easier now that if you want to use a more modern Java library, you don't have to worry about, will GA Flex support it or GA Standard support it. Now with GA Standard, just about anything that's a Java library will run. You don't have to really worry about the Java versions.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's go to the next.
Awesome.
New regions, pretty obvious.
Yep.
Building tons and tons of data centers now. I mean, we spent $30 billion, I think, or something, some crazy number over the last 3 years on infrastructure, and that's just continuing to expand our footprint.
I think the exciting thing though about Sydney is just from a networking standpoint, you're looking at a drastic reduction in latency for a lot of people that, have concerns about hopping to and from Sydney. So that's been really exciting for people I work with. Just like, okay, the next closest thing is no longer LA or Taiwan or Singapore. It's actually, we have something in Australia.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, and I think another cool thing is just, I mean, this is a trend that isn't going to stop anytime soon. I think you can see here that we have future regions planned for the Netherlands, Frankfurt, Finland. I know that if you look in the Southeast, in Southeast Asia, we are going to Mumbai as well, I believe. So yeah, I mean, this is a trend that's going to keep up and it reflects the investment that you're talking about, Jonathan.
Yeah. So let's see. Engineering courses, data. Okay, yeah. So I mean, as we continue to grow Google Cloud, there's always a lot of training involved, and a lot of our customers, I mean, first thing they ask is, well, I'm new to GCP. How do we get started? And one of the things that they, that we usually share is we announced a partnership with Coursera, and now I think most of these are free. I think there's a couple of them where it's like the next level where you might have to pay, but I think the first kind of the introductory level classes are just self-service at your own pace.
So the cloud architecture and the data engineering in their entire scope is a multi-part course, and the entire scope of it is not free, but for sure, like the intros you can start delving into.
Right.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of in line with the certifications that we have available as well, or the exams. There's one in cloud architecture and there's one in data engineering. So I know that we offer some of these trainings in person. And those are super useful. You're in a classroom over a number of days, getting hands-on experience with labs. But if you're remote, I know that our viewership, for instance, is across the world. Here for GCP Online Meetup, I think this is a great way to incorporate it into your schedule while still preparing for the exam. I personally have gone through both of them. I would say in the data engineering course, there's an incredible module on machine learning that actually goes beyond stuff that is Google Cloud Platform specific. Actually dives into a lot of the just principles and general frameworks like TensorFlow. And it starts at a very conceptual level, which is super useful for me as I am no machine learning expert. So Locke in our PSO team created that module, and it's incredible. So I encourage all of you out there to go and take the data engineering course.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, it's pretty in depth and it goes pretty deep. I mean, even into the levels of where I'm like, you know what, I don't know this, and it's just, yeah.
But Jonathan, you built a hot dog or no hot dog machine learning model. I'd consider you an expert since you did that.
Yeah. Bugging me about sharing this link that.
But the question is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yeah. So Colin, why don't you go ahead and paste that link and see what our viewers want? See if they can share pictures of what they think is a hot dog or no hot dog. I spent countless hours trying to perfect this model, but it's never going to be perfect. And I think Colin put a picture of Steph in the model, and it says it's not a hot dog, and I think that's pretty accurate.
I can't believe we're even contesting this right now, whether or not I'm a hot.
All right, Colin. So Colin's going to put it in the link.
Cool. And just a quick plug is that Jonathan did spend a good half hour talking about how he built that model. So definitely go check that out on our GCP Online Meetup page.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So Cloud Dataflow Shuffle. If there are any Dataflow users out there, definitely raise your hand in the chat. We want to know. But for those of you who are not familiar with it, it is a data processing framework that supports both batch and stream processing. And so we have seen it internally as the logical successor to MapReduce, which we also put a research paper out on. And so after kind of working with it internally, we've open sourced it as Apache Beam. And so one cool part about Cloud Dataflow is that we've exposed a shuffle service. And so what this means is, so typically in Cloud Dataflow, you have a set of workers that are deployed when you submit a job for execution to the service. And so in your typical map, shuffle, reduce, all of this is performed across those workers. But what we're actually doing now is exposing a service that takes off the shuffle portion of that outside of your worker nodes. And so this reduces CPU consumption, memory consumption across your workers that are executing the job, and passes it off to a backend shuffle service that is a bit automagical from my understanding of it. And then, what results from that is more efficient pipelines, less resources that you need to consume. And so there is a charge for it, but still the expectation is that your jobs will execute with more efficiency and presumably at a lower cost, even with that charge for using the shuffle service. So if you are using Cloud Dataflow, I'd encourage you to try it. There's also a really cool blog post out there talking about our history with massive shuffles. If you're looking to get some, see Google street cred, I think, it talks about how for some of our consumer-based products, we've performed, I think, 50 petabyte shuffles before. And so we're exposing that service to Cloud Dataflow, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, Dataflow is one of those products that it's like a Swiss Army knife. I mean, it can do everything. It can do a lot of things, and it's usually in the middle of every big data pipeline because all big data needs some kind of extract, transform, and loading of it. So, basically every customer that I've been working with is trying to figure out, okay, how do I do ETL very quickly? And that's kind of where Dataflow comes in, right? There's zero infrastructure management. It scales out automatically. It's just an API call, and you point, and it'll pull from things like PubSub, GCS, and actually, we're building a bunch of adapters for Dataflow to make it easier to push data into Dataflow. I don't know. I think Colin is about to say something.
What I also like about Dataflow, it's the same as what I like about Kubernetes, which is it's flexible. You can run it on a single VM. You can run it on Spark. Beam gives you that flexible programming interface that you can kind of run these jobs anywhere. So especially for some people where it's like, I want to get my data from on-prem to Google Cloud, but I can't get the IP whitelisted of Google. You can always run your Dataflow job locally to kind of get started. And then when you finally get that permission to go run this in the cloud, you set up the VPNs and whatnot. You literally just deploy it to the cloud, kind of like a container in that regard. As well as recently with Beam, they've announced something called Dataflow templates. And what that lets you do is you can basically programming your Dataflow job, and then the arguments you give to the job, like what's the SQL query, what's my pub sub topic, where should I store my data, that would all be done when you run it. So when you pass this job along within your company, you don't have to compile those as part of the program itself. You can just kind of say, go to the cloud UI, click run, provide some parameters, and it will just kind of run in the cloud.
And that's available right now?
Yep.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, so Colin's been doing a lot of very interesting work with Dataflow, and probably in the next couple months, we'll see some interesting projects come out of a lot of the work he's been doing on Dataflow. But yeah, I mean, Dataflow, I feel like is kind of the heart of a lot of the big data pipelines. And I just see it continuing a lot of investment from Google on that product. And with Apache Beam being open source, it really provides the openness and flexibility for customers who maybe want to run it on their own environment using Spark as the Apache Beam runner.
Definitely. Anything else on Dataflow we want to bring up? I'm trying to think.
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
8 minutes left. Let's go.
All right, let's do it.
Gosh. Hey, let's just skip to Spanner because everybody knows I love Spanner.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's whatever. Spanner.
It's whatever. Oh my gosh. You're fired at the GCP leader.
Jonathan, I'm this close to clicking the eject button for you, but you're hosting this, so I can't do that.
The funny thing about Vision API is that, I mean, it's very simple to explain like what it does, but obviously the work and the amount of, the amount of effort to make it accurate and like scalable is very difficult, right?
I feel like that's why I like talking about it, is because simple, and I'm a simple guy, so simple-minded.
Yeah.
And apparently not a hot dog.
Not a hot dog.
Oh, I was worried there. I wasn't sure. Vision API update. So for those of you who are familiar with it, if you've been using it more, in the past year and a half, you'll know it for label detection, which basically identifies, hey, this is a skyscraper or not a skyscraper. This is a hot dog to a certain level of confidence. And there are other things like, more traditional use cases like OCR, being able to read text in an image. What else is there? Being able to detect emotion in a human face to a certain level of confidence. So we've actually added a handful of new features that I think are really cool. I think the coolest to point out is web detection. So this is something where you can actually give images to the API, and it will the response will include metadata or labels that it's seen from either the same image or similar images across Google search, right? So things that we have indexed, we're able to return to you the metadata of these images that appear online. And also we can do a reverse URL search. And this is where it'll actually return where these images appear elsewhere, which is a huge, it's a huge feature for, people who are looking to do fraud, evaluate fraud in their users. They're able to take images and say, oh, okay, this profile picture appears like 30 times elsewhere in the internet. And, I think that's a pretty cool use case that someone talked to me about. So definitely would encourage you to play with it. I think it's one of the things that you can get started with quickly. It's you can either look at it on cloud.google.com/vision and upload your own photos, or again, look at the API or client library quick starts, and those will help you kind of experiment with it.
Very cool. Great update.
Awesome. Google Cloud Onboard World Tour.
Yeah, you were there yesterday, right?
Yeah, Steph and I were there. This is something that we just wanted to put out there to our viewers, is that we should paste a link into the chat, but we are giving away our introductory training courses for free. It's a day-long session where we have our trainers and a handful of us customer engineers supporting a day of education, while we do have modules prepared to review a lot of the core infrastructure features that support a lot of the products that we have on Google Cloud Platform. There's also, again, a huge presence of customer-facing of the customer-facing team, and so you can ask us questions, talk about your use case. It was pretty cool to see a lot of the engagement that we got out of that yesterday. And Steph, I don't know if you want to talk about your experience, but I loved it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I sort of came in on it a little last minute, but it's great to see the questions people are asking. And a lot of it's questions of features and things that, we've heard people asking for, and we're working on them. There's this huge feature list for the ML team that every question yesterday was on that list. And I was like, how do you prioritize? But it was a lot of fun. Really great to see the different demos. Jen Tong did a great demo on BigQuery, and people were just loving it. We had Mark Mendel talking a little bit about some of his scaling with Kubernetes, and then Thorgain was doing, computers at scale. And then right after that, we got a question about, how long does it take for a VM to come up? And we kind of re-referenced it saying like instantaneously. I mean, there's no pre-warming. So it's good to see these things in action instead of hearing people talk about them all the time. Absolutely.
I totally forgot to shout out that DevRel also supports these, and they're an amazing team, and really do a great job at demoing and actually proving a lot of the things that we put on these slides. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, definitely, if we'll get that into the chat, and you should see if it's coming to a city near you, as I know that there's still a handful of sessions that we're going through on this tour.
Right, so it'll be in SoCal next month. I know of one that's happening in Venice Beach. I believe it's on August 17th, but don't hold me to that. And then personal to me is the one that's going to be happening in October in Seattle. So I will be at that one.
Yes, go visit Steph up in Seattle.
Yeah, it's going to be super cold.
Super hot. Is it really? Oh, I guess, yeah. It's
in October, yeah. I'm pretty sure it's going to be freezing.
All right. So on board now to Spanner. I mean, we've been talking about Spanner for the last couple months. I know, GA just means that it's ready to go, production ready. And I mean, what other things do you want to discuss about Spanner besides the fact that it's super popular?
I think an introduction would be kind of cool, as there may be people who haven't heard about it. And I'm not sure we've had a GCP Online Meetup on Spanner yet.
No.
Have we?
It's coming up.
Steph, I'm going to pass the rock to you. Any chance you want to just give our viewers out there a taste of Spanner?
In 1 minute? Okay, yeah. So I like to say Spanner is, again, I came from a pretty heavy SQL admin DBA background. So to me, Spanner is the answer to when traditional SQL is just not good enough, not fast enough, not big enough, can't scale. When you're running strong consistency over eventual consistency. Spanner is our globally available database, but currently it's available regionally, but it will be available. You can replicate it across multiple regions here soon. And the idea again is that it automatically creates these replicas into 3 different zones. So, we're consistently keeping with that Google idea of high availability, durability, and resiliency. I don't like saying those 3 words back to back. It's a bit of a tongue twister. And another great thing about it is people ask me, well, why would I use Spanner? How do I know that it's going to be capable of running anything for that matter? And I was like, well, Google runs Spanner. GCP runs on Spanner. Everything runs on Spanner. Spanner is basically the answer to everything that we have. So that's why I'm such a fangirl about it. So yeah, it's got some differences from your traditional, data manipulation language and things you might expect, but it has some benefits in that especially in the scalability front. I think I've said scale about 4 times in that. So
yeah. So
it's a really great database. Not for everyone. Sometimes you have to say, do I have enough data for this? But it's definitely, a lot of people are really excited about it because it's the next step in trying to keep SQL alive, I guess, and relational databases alive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that was my
IoT Core, last one. We're actually out of time, but let's cover it.
All right. So Cloud IoT Core is this is something that we've recently, I don't know how old it is, the past couple months maybe, but it's basically a collection of Google Cloud Platform products with a couple of new features that allows us to really support IoT use cases more so than we have been able to in the past. I think a couple things are, security for device management. That is a specific IoT Core feature. I think there's also an MQTT bridge in front of PubSub that's specific to Cloud IoT Core. But maybe we should pitch it to the IoT specialists if Colin wants to give a few words for that as well.
Yeah, IoT man.
Yeah, so you have Cloud IoT, which is kind of your front end for your IoT devices. It gives them identity, which is a very complex problem. And then it just sends all your data to PubSub, which is our messaging process. And from there, you can kind of put the data anywhere. You can put it into BigQuery, you can put it into Spanner, and it also allows you to kind of send messages to and from the IoT device. So you can have a two-way communication without you having to worry about scaling up that front end.
That's awesome. How are people doing device management before? Was it, or identity, I guess, is that like just through service accounts or?
Well, I think the joke was that if you look at most IoT devices, you always hear about all these security flaws that go out. I think my favorite was there was a child's toy that was a teddy bear, where the parents could basically record a message in an app, and when your kid played with the teddy bear, it would basically play back your message. But it turned out there was no security. So anyone in the world could send your kid a message, which, as you can imagine, it got pretty bad fast. So obviously, due to the complexity of the problem, we figured we'd come out with a product that kind of abstracts away a lot of this. So you don't have to worry about how do I implement encryption correctly and whatnot. It's kind of turnkey.
Yeah, so obviously security is very important in IoT these days. I mean, I think, I was at IoT World, actually Colin and I were both there. We were manning the booth, and obviously the concerns are around, when you have hundreds or thousands of devices, you don't have the time to update, secure, patch all of these devices. So Google is kind of investing a lot of time, energy, and money into building out a platform using IoT Core as well as Android things to kind of solve these challenges that exist today in the industry. Because today there really is no good, there's no good solution for a lot of these things.
Absolutely.
I think that's the long-running joke in the InfoSec community is everybody can hack into these devices and nobody's really figured out how to protect them yet. So
yeah,
we'll see as this space kind of expands and escalates as we go forward.
Yeah, my only advice is don't buy a children's toy that has internet access. It doesn't need it. I don't care what you say.
It sounds like it's coming from personal experience,
Yeah,
Cham.
with 2 kids, it's like there's really zero. I mean, yeah, there's zero need for them to have internet access. But anyway, yeah, I think we're 4 minutes over. But any last parting thoughts from Steph, Anthony, Colin? Enjoy the sun.
Yeah, enjoy
All
the
right.
sun. Go play around with some cloud functions.
Oh yeah, cloud functions. There we go. Yeah, I wish we need to have another meetup, like a 30-minute meetup on just kind of cool technologies that not many people know about. I have a bunch. I mean, there's just so many things in Google Cloud Platform right now that it's impossible to know about all the little cool, nifty things that exist. We should definitely do that.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining today, and we look forward to the next online meetup. Thank you.
Thank you.